630 boxes of original 2020 election ballots are currently sitting in a federal evidence vault, and according to a skeptical federal judge, those documents may never return to the custody of the county that issued them.
The Fulton County Board of Elections is meeting to discuss candidate Tiffany Henard's qualifications for the May primary. It's a story we've been on top of here. Angelique Proctor in Fairburn with the afternoon's latest developments. Angelique?
Well, good afternoon to you, Tom. We are here at the Fulton County Board of Elections hub. They actually had a meeting this afternoon and made a decision to look into the residency of this very controversial candidate. She is Tiffany Henard, and like you said, we have done stories on her before. She was dubbed America's worst mayor by Newsweek and other publications. She is quite charismatic, the former mayor of Dalton, Illinois, where she lost her re-election bid after allegations of lavish spending. Now, she immediately moved to Atlanta. She has since qualified to become a Fulton County commissioner here. She's interested in representing District 5 that Marvin Arrington held for so long. But the chair of the Fulton County Board of Elections says two electors and members of the public have raised questions about her residency. Now, Henard told Fulton County officials she has rented a house in the Chattering Springs subdivision in the southern part of the county.
We have seen a lease for May 1st, 2025, and on that same date, she was also still the mayor of a city in Illinois. We'll ask our attorney first to explain what the law is with regarding to determine if the Board of Superintendents can challenge. At the time that she gave us the lease with a resident in Fulton County on May 1st, 2025. At that same time, she was also living in and a mayor in Illinois and also a supervisor of a township in Illinois.
So that is the question. How can you live in Fulton County and be a mayor in Illinois at the same time on the same day? Those are questions that this board will now hope to answer. They have actually decided to have a residency hearing in April next week, next Thursday, April 9th. And at that time, they are expecting Henard to come forward and explain exactly what all of this is about.
We are witnessing a massive chain of custody crisis, where the primary source documents of an entire election cycle have been reclassified as federal investigative assets, leading the local election board in a state of operational insolvency. While the county attorneys argue that digital copies are a non-material substitute for physical originals, the federal government has effectively performed a hostile takeover of the paper trail, creating a precedent that could turn local election hubs into subsidiaries of the FBI. This is the ultimate audit of the ballot. And for Camilo's house, we are documenting a scenario where the internal controls of a state's sovereignty are being overridden by a federal warrant that the courts seem increasingly unwilling to rescind. I am Camila Motato, and this is Camilo's house. As a certified public accountant focused on forensic verification, I look past the political theater to see the underlying statutory liabilities and operational defaults. In a standard audit, the original document is the only gold standard for true and fair representation. If a client tells you they have a mirror image of a receipt, but the original has been seized by a competitor, you immediately flag the account for systemic risk. Today, we are performing a forensic integrity audit on Fulton County, Georgia, a region that has become a high-risk portfolio of legal challenges. We are analyzing the material conflict between a local government trying to recover its sovereign records and a federal judiciary that appears to be validating the retention of those records. We are also documenting the residency default of the newcomer to the Georgia stage, Tiffany Henard, whose concurrent residence in two states on the same day has created a reporting discrepancy that the Board of Elections is now forced to investigate. The operational breach at the Fulton County Elections Hub began in late January, when the FBI executed a search warrant and liquidated the county's physical inventory of 2020 ballots. Since then, the county has been in full panic mode, filing a motion for return of property under Rule 41G of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure. From an investigative standpoint, the materiality of this case hinges on the four-factor test for callous disregard. To win their ballots back, Fulton County must prove that the FBI showed an intentional or reckless disregard for the law in obtaining the warrant. However, U.S. District Judge J.P. Boulay a Trump appointee who is now auditing the predicates of the case, issued a preliminary audit opinion last Friday that has left the county's defense in a state of technical default. Judge Boulay appeared deeply skeptical of the county's requested relief. During a high-stakes hearing at the Richard Russell Federal Building, he quashed the subpoena for the FBI agent who signed the affidavit used to secure the warrant. This is a critical impediment to the county's case. Without the ability to cross-examine the auditor who signed the warrant, the county has zero traceability to prove that the omissions in the affidavit were reckless rather than merely inadvertent. In accounting terms, the internal controls of the warrant process are being shielded from a full audit, leaving the county with an unqualified opinion that the search was lawful. Judge Boulay remarked that the county's need for the physical originals to comply with open records requests was not a gigantic issue, suggesting that the digital assets provided by the government are a sufficient settlement for the claim. The county's attorney, Abby Lowell, argued that the FBI's seizure was unusual and showed a callous disregard for state law. He contended that the original election allegations have already been audited and closed by multiple state and local agencies over the last several years. However, the federal government's counter-audit is that just because other entities said one thing, it doesn't mean the FBI is barred from investigation. The DOJ is essentially arguing that there is an ongoing predicate that requires the physical retention of the 630 boxes. They are treating the ballots as evidence of an undisclosed liability, while the county views them as sovereign public property that has been wrongfully seized. Fulton County Commission Chair Rob Pitts has labeled this federal retention a blueprint. From a strategic risk perspective, Pitts is warning about a nationalization of local law enforcement. He argues that if the FBI is successful in retaining the ledger of Fulton County, they will take this show on the road, performing similar hostile takeovers of election records in other counties across the country. This is a systemic threat to the decentralized infrastructure of the American electoral system. If the federal auditor has the power to seize the receipts of an election years after the closing date, then the finality of the audit is never truly reached. The voter stakeholders are left in a state of permanent uncertainty, never knowing if their sovereign transaction is still under federal review. While the ballot box audit reaches a deadlock in federal court, a new management conflict has emerged on the Fulton County stage. Tiffany Henard, the former mayor of Dolton, Illinois, who was dubbed America's worst mayor, has migrated her brand to Atlanta. She is qualified to run for a Fulton County Commission seat in District 5, but her residency ledger is currently out of balance. The Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections has unanimously voted to hold a special qualification hearing on April 9th to address a material discrepancy in her residency status. From a forensic verification standpoint, the Henard case is a classic residency conflict. She provided a lease for a residence in Fulton County dated May 1, 2025. However, on that exact same date, source documents and public records show that she was still serving as the mayor of a city in Illinois and as a supervisor of a township. In any professional licensing audit, being the executive of record in two different states on the same day is a reporting failure. You cannot have primary residency in Georgia while simultaneously holding a sovereign public office that requires primary residency in Illinois. This is an operational inconsistency that suggests her lease asset was backdated or that her Illinois tenure was improperly extended. The reputational risk for Fulton County here is immense. Henard's tenure in Dolton was marked by allegations of lavish spending and a total breakdown in internal controls. By allowing a controversial candidate with an unresolved liability in another state to join the Board of Commissioners, Fulton County would be importing volatility into its own governance. 2 voter electors have already raised formal challenges to her qualifications, forcing the Board of Elections to perform a due diligence review of her lease agreement and residency timeline. The chair of the board is now asking the county attorney to explain the statutory standard for determining if a concurrent residence constitutes a default on qualification. The Henard pivot is also a sign of a political realignment. After her unceremonious exit from the Illinois market, Henard has reportedly shifted her political portfolio toward a Republican-leaning stance. This brand migration is a market strategy common in distressed political assets. When a brand becomes toxic in one vertical, the management often attempts a hostile rebranding in a new vertical. However, the residency default is a hard stop that no amount of charismatic rebranding can overcome. If she was a mayor in Illinois on May 1, 2025, her Georgia residency clock had not yet started, making her ineligible for the 2026 audit cycle of the Fulton County Commission. We must also look at the geopolitical stress affecting the Fulton County hub. While the Board of Elections is debating leases and ballots, the national atmosphere is in a state of multi-front volatility. The No Kings protests mentioned in recent market reports show a systemic dissatisfaction with executive overreach. Thousands of people are gathering in downtown Atlanta and Sandy Springs to protest what they see as the insolvency of the rule of law. This social unrest is a leading indicator of a crisis of confidence in the management at the top. Whether it is Fani Willis under a public records audit by Judicial Watch or the FBI holding the 2020 ledger, the voter stakeholders are seeing a material failure in the transparency of the system. The FBI retentional strategy is perhaps the most damaging disclosure of the month. By producing digital copies of the election records on the eve of the hearing, the DOJ performed a tactical settlement to undercut the county's claim of irreparable harm. From a forensic accounting perspective, a digital copy is a derivative asset. It might contain the same data points, but it lacks the physical integrity and ballistic evidence of the original paper receipt. Abby Lowell's argument that the county needs the physical originals to authenticate the copies is a valid procedural requirement. In any high-stakes reconciliation, the original ledger is the only definitive proof. By quashing the subpoena for the FBI agent, Judge Boulay has effectively certified the federal chain of custody as unquestionable, leaving the county with a management letter of significant deficiencies but no path to recovery. The Fulton County 2020 election dispute is now a permanent liability on the national balance sheet. The FBI retention is not just a legal hold, it is a sovereign takeover of the electoral infrastructure. As Rob Pitts noted, this is the blueprint for a nationalization of state records. If the federal auditor can seize the originals and force the local manager to accept digital proxies, then the autonomy of the state ledger is functionally null and void. We are looking at a consolidation of power, where the Washington, D.C. management has the final word on the validity of the vote in every county in America. This jurisdictional creep is a systemic risk that no Republican or Democratic stakeholder should ignore. My forensic verdict on the Fulton County April 2026 audit is that we are witnessing a total operational default of local sovereignty. The FBI retention of the 630 boxes is a hostile asset seizure that the courts are refusing to reverse. The Tiffany Henard residency challenge is a material discrepancy that proves the internal controls for candidate qualification are stressed to the breaking point. Whether it is America's worst mayor trying to refinance her career in District 5 or the Justice Department holding the paper receipts of the 2020 election, the Fulton County Ledger is in a state of permanent disarray. The residency hearing on April 9th will be the final reconciliation for the Henard brand. If she cannot provide verified source documents that prove her Georgia residency was exclusive and continuous while she was a mayor in Illinois, her candidate portfolio will be liquidated. Simultaneously, the FBI ballot audit will likely head to the appeals court, but as long as the original assets stay in the federal evidence room, the investigation remains a dark pool of information that the public cannot audit. We are living in a post-accountability market where the truth is a redacted document and the rules are whatever the management with the search warrant says they are. I want to hear from you. Is the FBI's retention of original ballots a necessary investigative hold, or is it a callous disregard for the chain of custody of our democracy? Should Tiffany Henard be allowed to audit a commission seat in Georgia while her Illinois ledger is still in a state of unresolved liability? Let me know in the comments. Your perspective is the only audit that matters when the integrity of the ballot and the residency of our leaders are sitting on the negotiation table. I am Camila Motato, and this is Camilo's House. Subscribe to stay informed on the numbers, the laws, and the truth behind the headlines. Stay safe.